Recording in progress. Super. Thank you very much, Vicky. Thanks for that intro. Also, by the way, because this is the last one, I want to take this opportunity to just thank everybody at Creative Futures for doing the hard work of setting these panels up. I think they're tremendously valuable and useful, and also to say thank you and welcome to our tremendous panel today. Today we have Kathleen Loski, who is a freelance creative retoucher. She's based in Vancouver, and her work has been featured in Applied Arts, Lurzer's Archive, and Communication Arts, all of which are publications that, if you are interested in the creative business, you should get to know and understand why. Those are pretty impressive credentials. Also, we have Regan Fraser, who is an art director at McCann West. She started with a degree in fine arts, actually, from the University of Regina before transitioned over to advertising. And with her now, are you guys a creative team, or are you just working at the same place, Mark and Regan?
Yeah, well, we're both art directors by trade, so we're not traditional creative team, but yeah, we end up being a creative team on most jobs.
Okay, terrific. So Mark is also an associate creative director at McCann West, and he is a graduate of George Brown College. And finally, we have Adam Kereliuk. I should have asked you. Kereliuk, correct?
Kereliuk, yeah, close.
Kereliuk, thank you. Close. My apologies. And Adam is a graduate of OCAD University, and he lives in BC, where he runs his studio, Measured Mothered, and he is the creative strategist and a designer. And he also has a very cool side hustle, which is as co-founder of Plot Wines. And hopefully we get to hear a little bit about that as we go on. So I'm going to hand this session to Kathleen to begin. And Kathleen, over to you.
Cool. Hi, thanks for having me. My name's Kathleen. I graduated from Langara College in the photography program. Prior to that, I did just general fine art, and that's kind of that pivoting point where you decide, what do you want to specialize in? So from there, I was just spending tons of time in the darkroom, and took the photography program where I got a good technical base. From there, my first job was with a small retouching house that specializes in hospitality brands, so it was nothing glamorous. And then just started meeting people working in the industry, taking on gigs, and working from there and just trying to expand my skill set. So yeah, that's a bit about me, and yeah.
So Kathleen, just tell us the job of a retoucher it's almost kind of like a hidden and secret skill and talent, which all of us in the business depend on immensely. Could you just sort of back in a little bit to what does your job entail? What kind of technology do you use? What does your day look like when you're and who are the kinds of clients you tend to work with?
Sure, yeah. So my day shifts day to day. I work on many different projects, many different campaigns. At the moment, word of mouth is a big point on how I get work, or even meet other contacts, to meet agents through agencies or through different photographers. There's a few different avenues that I work. It's either client direct, agency direct, or through a photographer, where perhaps I work with a photographer to work on a concept and figure out how we're going to approach shooting and how we're going to composite this all together. So it just really depends on the process, the project, and also who you know, right? So sometimes it's even a DM on Instagram saying, hey, I've seen you've worked on animals or just fur. Like, can I email you with a project? And I said, yeah, sure. So therefore, there's a couple bear projects I've worked on. So yeah, that's kind of where it is. Initially, I started doing a lot of drawing and painting and photography. So that's kind of a nice meld of all those skills. And I also did my practicum with Steve Pinter in Langara. So that's actually where I learned a little bit more about the process, what a retoucher does, what programs they use. So I personally use Photoshop and a few other programs to process images, Capture One, and other programs like that. So that's kind of in a nutshell where I come in, and yeah.
Very cool. So just to probe a little bit on that, as a creative person, what aspect do you think of your personality and your approach to creativity contributed to you ending up in this particular very specialized component of the creative industries?
Good question. I think that I guess having a bit of interest on the reality portion, drawing, figure drawing, realistic drawing, and then also the photography component, understanding perspective, and being able to kind of combine all those skills and your eye for light. As for my personality, I think, I've met a few other retouchers. Some of them are a little bit more introverted. Some of them come off a little bit more extroverted. I found that for me, I like to, I actually like to bring my book to people, like whether it's on my iPad or a physical book. That's actually how I met Mark a few years ago. So it's just, I think that for me, it's an asset being able to kind of meet people in person, create a connection, and, put yourself out there. And sometimes you get work through it. Sometimes don't. Sometimes you just gain a friend. So the industry is quite small. So it's also about just being able to kind of adapt and meet people and share connections as well.
Cool. Now, if you were to sort of maybe suggest to someone who is beginning to show an interest in that particular field, or perhaps someone who's just sort of got into Photoshop and is finding it really sort of fascinating and interesting, and maybe might consider this as a career path, what would be a suggestion or two that you would have for someone to explore that possibility?
I'd say send me an email. Like let's grab coffee. Always happy to talk about what I do and kind of how it started and some more details. I also think just create projects for yourself and get inspired and keep working on different interesting things that maybe push the boundaries of your personal skill sets, or enter other skills or other crafts, or maybe another media as well. I think it's always like a really good time to just start pushing the boundaries of what you're able to do and your skills, and being able to kind of hone down on that before you solely kind of target one specific area, right? I think it's nice just to try a few different things and then be able to see what works and what your style is as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think most creative professionals would agree that wherever they are in their career, it's been a not a straight path. That we all sort of find our way through, and doors open in mostly from trying things or being presented with opportunities, and you just say, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm just going to try it. And
exactly. And there was a Photoshop course within the Langara photography program, and that's kind of one specific course I seem to kind of always hone in on. I'd always kind of ask my instructor questions about a project or whatever. And I think naturally, if you kind of are gravitating towards a specific field or maybe a specific area, like just kind of explore that and, meet people and learn more about it.
Yeah. And I think it's an interesting point you make about meeting people and being social. And, one of the things that actually came up in an earlier panel was the importance of connecting with the broader creative community, and especially if you're in school, or like sort of to reach out beyond it and try to find people who are doing similar work, or seek out mentors, or seek out volunteer opportunities that connect you with the local creative community, because you never know where those connections might lead you, whether it's to work or whether it's to a new creative direction, or to, just an interesting, maybe creative partner that you might come across.
Totally. Yeah. Especially even just working on collaborations or getting someone else's eye on a personal project. Like, I think that's a really great opportunity to foster relationships, but also meet other people and potentially gain some work, or even gain a friend. Right. So.
Yeah. Fantastic. Terrific. Well, I mean, and now just to be clear, you have actually worked with Mark and Regan, correct?
I think we actually have worked on one project. I did bring out my book to Calgary when I was out there for ad rodeo, and just kind of did a mass email and, hey, I'm in town. Let me know if you want to meet for coffee and check my book out. And that's how I met Mark, actually. Yeah.
Oh, terrific. And that, to be perfectly honest, was the segue that I was looking for to hand us over to Mark and Regan and give us their perspective from the agency perspective as art directors in a major agency. Mark and Regan, you have the floor.
Sure. Yeah, I was gonna lead with that too. It's like, yeah, we worked with Kathleen. She came out, she showed us her book, and we were like, this stuff's great. I mean, we didn't have an opportunity at that time. Then something came up a little bit later, and we are like, this is fantastic. So it was good to be at a small piece that we got to work there. But same thing. I'm Mark Lovely, associate creative director at McCann, and I've sort of traditionally an art director come up through the. I'll do me, and then Regan will do her, and then we'll talk about how we work together. I came up actually through production. So I went to design school in Toronto at George Brown and moved out to Calgary a few years ago, quite a few years ago. Worked through a few different agencies. I was in production. I was a Photoshop artist for a little while at Trigger, if anybody knows Trigger. And I just kind of wanted to make the leap and to be an art director. And from there, I just sort of worked in a few different shops. And then I've been at McCann now for 13 years. And the idea of like just trying to find opportunities, and the opportunities have changed, and where we've had different clients come through. We've had Mark's Warehouse, General Motors. We work on Bear Crop Science, Western Canadian Lotteries, which is like the 649, and all the scratch tickets, which is a huge one for us. What else do we do? National Music Center. Quite a few different. We've had different opportunities, and that's like kind of why I always like the idea of art direction and being an agency is you get those different opportunities that come at you. So day to day, we're working on the lotteries today, but we're working on selling agriculture pieces tomorrow. And then the next day we're working on the ballet, and then we're working on cars next week. So it mixes up, and it always keeps it interesting. I never really just wanted to work on one thing. And that's kind of the interest in that. That's my kind of day to day. And then Regan. Yeah.
Can I interrupt you? I just want to just for the sake of the people who'll be watching, could you just unpack a little bit the difference between what do you mean by production versus art?
Sure.
Because I think that's one of those things that's not really well understood about the way agencies operate.
So when I came out of school, like I said, I got into production. What that means is, so in creative, when we get, or basically in an agency, when we get a project and we get a brief, it comes into the creative team concepts, comes up with ideas, sells to the client. Client says yes. They kind of either shoot it or go from there, and then it goes on to production where they have to actually finish the work. So that becomes into whether we hire Kathleen or we do Photoshop ourselves, layout, ad sizes, different pieces for print, building banners, if it's all digital, building sites, and how that workflow works. All production part of that is kind of below the line after it's been approved. Now it gets into like the nuts and bolts of how it works and goes live, if you will. Right? So, right, go ahead.
Yeah, so then the kind of levels of how to get to an art director, you would come out of school, you'd probably go into a production role where, like when I started, you get a piece of paper with like a sketch on it and you would create it on the computer. So then we would go from there, and then you would kind of get like design projects here and there, maybe a little opportunities to art direct something, you know, when something's kind of small, maybe you can work on it, being overseen by the art director.
Yep.
And then you kind of, if you want, some people love being in studio, they love building the files, they really like the digital side of layout and paragraph styles and building things,
which is super valuable.
Yeah, very valuable.
Super valuable, yes.
Yeah.
And then if you would like, after a while, you can usually become an art director, where you just get into more of the conceptual phases. Not that we don't build our own files, because we definitely still have to do that. So whenever we
we're super picky too. We're just like, because we came from there, we're like, it has to be exact. So we might make it easy on production. But anyway.
Yes. And then so we build our files and then we give it to somebody in studio, which is just a relationship that you have with studio, where they will, let's say we give them one poster, they now have to make 15 newspaper ads and 6 different banner ad sizes. So then they would build all those, and we work with them and oversee them and stand over their shoulder and pick at what they're doing all day.
but they also work with the newspapers or the digital, like with the online pieces. Basically, they work with all the vendors to get the advertising live, or the event, or the site, or whatever it may be, or the print piece. So if they work with a print house, then they have to go and make sure it works. We usually go to press checks, but that would be where they have to make sure that it's going to print correctly if it's a print type of thing.
Mhm.
I guess it just, I find that it's really important to understand that distinction between the art director, what is an art director versus what is a production designer, and the fact that both, both gigs are fantastically important. And there's a temperamental difference, I think, between the people who really want to be on the production side and are really sort of laser focused on making things perfect and beautiful, and have that real, I don't want to say introverted, because although it seems to maybe go that way a little bit sometimes, but the people who just want to design beautiful things and don't want to worry about the concepting part of it, that is more the art director's job.
You get into a difference there as well, as that a designer and a production designer are different as well.
Right.
So
Yeah.
production would be more like finishing and preparing files and making sure, like working with the vendors, whereas a designer is more of like that trying to get that perfect look and the feel, you know what I mean? Like that's
exactly. Yeah.
kind of like, which we do also. Like that's kind of like, there are kind of two roads on art directors in the traditional shop of like art directors and designers, where they kind of veer off of like more conceptual pieces and then more design focused pieces and how they deliver.
Yeah. And I think that when people are thinking about potential career paths, understanding that there are these different, all very interesting roads that you might want to think about, depending on what your creative temperament is actually.
Yeah, and just like Kathleen
Anyhow.
started photography and then sort of branched into fine art and a little bit of design, you know what I mean, of where that was going, and then it just kind of worked into where she's at now. So same idea.
Yeah. Terrific. Listen, I sort of derailed you for a second there, but I wanted to unpack that.
Yeah,
a
no,
little
it's
bit.
okay.
So back to where you were. I think you just handed over.
Time for Regan to introduce herself.
Okay, I'm Regan. I'm an art director at McCann. So I actually started out, I'm from Regina, and it has nothing to do with if we had internet or not, but we didn't have internet till like 1998. And so I didn't know what a designer was. I always knew that I wanted to, make patterns. I wanted to make wallpaper. So I just went into art school, fine arts, and I actually studied printmaking and ceramics. And then after that, I didn't know how to use a computer, but I felt like I had a lot of the tools it takes to create and to kind of concept and write rationales and things like that. So then I took a course in Edmonton just to kind of learn how to use everything. And then from there, went to a small agency as a production designer. So it would just be building files most of the days, making sure they're correct, lining things up, like fixing little mistakes, sending ads to publications. Like we worked on a lottery, and every day you'd have to send out 5 ads that say 5 days left, 4 days left. Like it's very technical, but then because of that, I learned how to use a computer so well and so fast. So now when we have something that we need to get done really quickly, you kind of have this tool set built. So then nothing gets in the way of getting those ideas out, because you spent the time perfecting the programs and learning and changing as they change. So I think it's super valuable for everybody to go through the studio and production kind of couple years at least, so that when you get to being an art director, you're more resourceful and just quicker, and there aren't so many obstacles in the way. Like when we hire, we definitely look for somebody who can make the file and who can get things done.
Yeah.
Like it's so valuable. And at the time, I think it feels sometimes like you're there for too long, but then after, it really pays off.
Yeah.
So then I was at agency as a studio, then I thought I would go client side. So I was an in-house designer at the university for a year. My mom said I had to make it for a year because of the resume. So in-house design is a little bit different than agency, because you're really just working for one client, and often your immediate manager is somebody who knows a little bit about marketing, but it is nothing like exciting as the agency life was for me. So I found it to be a very big difference. It just really depends on what you're looking for in it. If you'd like to work late and work on many different projects and really hustle and like, you know, like if you really feel like that's, I don't want to say love it. You can love it and work both. Anyways, I just like agency better. So I left the in-house, went to an agency, became an art director for 3 or 4 years, and then came to Calgary how many years ago? 7 years or so ago. And so I've been at McCann for 7 years.
So, so what is it? So I think the other question that people always have and actually I'll come back to this for everybody, but I'll start it with you and maybe after Adam. But what does your day look like? You know, is that in like what is the day in the life of someone who's doing your job in an agency look like? Or maybe even like a week or a season, you know, like how does it all sort of pan out for you in terms of the work being done?
For sure. So I think a regular day mornings is emails, making sure you get all the little stuff done, because everyone always wants like a high-res JPEG of a job you did 5 years ago. So you kind of get all that stuff out of the way. And then if we have a brief, they're usually early in the week. And then so we would kind of know what's on our plate. We would spend a lot of time with our partner. Mark and I spend so much time on Teams, just working and talking together, because it's so different now that we're all remote.
So we basically share an office, but we're just on Teams the whole time discussing all the work that we're doing. So I'm going to jump in on that one sec. Is that so basically we know that there is work coming down, a specific brief for a job that might show up, and then we get briefed on it. We get allocated whether we're working together or we're working with a writer or we're working individually, if it's just an art direction type of job or design type of job, whether that be creating logo, full campaigns, banners for something updated from last year's creative on a DM piece. Maybe it's just simple one pagers, like everything from top to bottom. We're doing all those things. But when we get briefed in, it's like we'll all come together with strategy in the team. So we get strategy, accounts, either copywriter, art director, creative leads. And then we go through the job and they tell us what we have to do. And then we're going to talk again in 10 days and see where we're at. So like that's if you want to talk about like how the day works. And then we kind of go, okay, well, we have to manage that time. Then usually we'll get another brief for another job and then another one. Like, so they kind of stack up and then you work on them, you puzzle them together yourself. So we're working on a little bit of lotteries. We're like, we got to come up with some concepts by Friday. We'll work on that. Now we've this other thing that came in that's a one pager. Regan, you just take that and you'd be able to figure that out on the side during whatever time. And then there's a logo thing that I'm working on with someone else, say Chelsea, who's another person in our office, another art director. And then we just kind of like piece it all together and meet the meetings and just end up sharing an office like Regan was just talking about.
So like a whole day is kind of some meetings, a lot of brainstorms together with the creative team, just sharing your work kind of internally. There's also internal meetings where we share our work with the account people just to make sure that we're all answering the brief properly. And then there are other meetings with creative directors. So usually you show your work. It's kind of like this levels of approvals or just kind of check-ins. So first, Mark and I share work with each other because we usually work on the same thing. And then normally it would go to a creative director, just somebody, just because he has an overview or he or she has an overview of what's kind of happening. And then we would go to the account people, which is kind of like the next kind of step away from us. And they would make sure it's all on brief. Strategy is usually there as well. And then we would do any revisions because there's always feedback because things are always changing. And then sometimes we've got client presentations. So a full day could also be like a brainstorm. Then you jump into a client presentation where we show what we have. So presenting and those types of skills are changing now, but they are very important to have.
Absolutely.
And then we'd get feedback from the client, and then we would go back, regroup as a whole team, and then like you kind of go backwards through those steps. So then it comes back down to Mark and I working on it again together, and then you kind of just, it's very cyclical.
Yeah.
Over and over.
One final question, and just to close that one off. When you guys get a new brief, how do you launch your? What are the initial stages of your ideation process like? Do you have any techniques? Do you have any approaches that you take normally, or ways to dive into the initial stages of a problem?
Not initial stages. First of all, Regan usually solves things by driving. I don't know. Usually calls.
Okay, this is really common. Like go for a long run. Right?
But it's a really mental form of like, if we dive in and start working on something, initial, I'm excited. Initially, it's like when we get work, it's like, let's work right now. Let's talk right now about it. Immediately.
But sometimes I do write things on the brief, and sometimes your first thought that you write like during the brief, like
something you hear
while the account person's talking, maybe one word triggers an idea, then you're just like, oh, this is funny, and you write it down, and that sometimes ends up being the fun idea.
Our doodles on our briefs end up being like, this is the worst, and it ends up being the whole campaign, or it's something that's all the way around our brief if we're using paper.
And then you kind of take it away and you kind of think about it for a bit. We usually wouldn't meet together to concept for a couple days. Because as soon as you start talking to somebody else, then it's real. It changes where your path was going, which is good and bad. But sometimes it's nice where you can go just on your own first, and then see more. Like
where people can help level up.
I don't even Google anything. I try, you can never go backwards from learning too much about a client and too much about the product. So it's always kind of nice to have that first few stages of just a little bit of ignorance and just really wild imagination. And then as you learn more and more, then it like chops you up a bit.
There's a book by, I'm assuming if nobody's read it, or I'm sure it's curriculum in a lot of places, is Hey Whipple, Squeeze This.
Oh yeah.
Which is super old. Read it. Everybody remember Luke Sullivan from years and years ago. But he had a really good quote in there about what to do when you get a briefing for a product. And he had a couple of options on it, like do the factory tour, find out everything you can about the product, or don't, because you're supposed to be that outside. So take that idea of like, I'm a consumer, has no idea how you make X car, X food, whatever, clothing, whatever it is. I just want to be on the outside looking as a consumer and really like drinking it up as the outsider, then giving your ideas on that. Then it's almost like there's that idea of like, maybe you get no information and then do the factory tour after you've thrown out some ideas, then go and find out everything you know about the product and go, oh, this is too much. And then it sort of helps inform each other. But that's how we do it, at least. Like everybody's different.
You can't turn it on and off. It's tough.
It's not a tap.
That's very cool. I think it's one of those really interesting components of like, anyone who works in creative professions, and like, like the whole question of, where do your ideas come from, and how do you do insight creativity and generate ideas. And so it's one of those, it's a bit of a people sometimes look at it as a black box, and it's actually not. There are ways that you can approach it that will work fairly consistently, but they're not, I don't think they're often discussed enough, or people sort of have this myth that
they're hard to nail down because they're not the same every time. And our asks aren't the same every time. So for instance, one might be, the first ask might be a lot of something where we can use an outside vendor, where we try to get like more video or animation or something into it, like to try and get a concept. We're like, how do we work that into it? But sometimes it's just really simple ideas that so I don't think anybody can nail it down. So we can never give out a handbook of like, this is how you come up with ideas. Even though somebody's done that.
Right.
But I think there are for sure stages that you go through. So your first is scared. Like usually I'm just always like, I am not going to think of anything, and this is going to be terrible. And I thought of even the last idea. Now I'm just like, you feel lost at the start, and then you kind of build on stuff, and then you find something that makes you feel like it's going to win awards, is be the best thing ever. And then you show it to somebody, and then you're kind of like back down to the ground on it. But I think each time, I think it's always the different stages of like confidence, and then worrying, and then, you're not sure. Like, it's just such a hard process to go through.
Bit of a roller coaster always.
But it always works out. It's fun.
And that's the thing. It always works out. It always works out.
Work out, guys.
Terrific. Terrific. That's awesome. So I think now maybe I'll hand it over to Adam. If you're, are you good to go, Adam?
Yeah,
Okay.
everyone, Adam here. I started out going to school for product design at OCAD in Toronto, and since then it's been a non-linear path forward to doing lots of different things. So I made up a quick deck to share if the connection holds out for me here. Can you see my screen? Am I frozen?
You're good. You're good.
Thumbs up. Okay, good.
Yep.
Okay. Brand strategist and designer, 10 years in the creative industry with a focus now on food and beverage and natural products, and a lot of wine within there, as you'll see. Entrepreneurial is something more recently, as you mentioned, a little side hustle became a lot more than a side hustle. So that's taking up part of my life now. And in general, just a non-linear path, as I said. When we were first joining the call, somebody was talking about trying to map out the years you were doing things, and I tried to create a map of what I've done so far. But it's starting out at OCAD there, and then shortly after design school in product design, especially, I found it just wasn't for me. And before that, even in high school, I had been super interested in 3D arts and graphic design, and that's something I always did on the side. And that really helped me in product design school, but I ended up reverting to it right after design school and kind of starting over again from the bottom, working at a print shop, working at a newspaper editorial company in Vancouver after that, before working at my first agency gig at Noise Digital, which is where I learned a lot. I learned everything that up until that point I had no idea what agency life was like. I even think I was a little scared of it too at the time. It seemed like something that was just way over my head. But yeah, cut my teeth in at Noise Digital. I got to work on a lot of cool projects under Nutella, Ferrero Rocher, Kinder Surprise, Kinder Bueno, Sleeman Beer. So I had a ton of fun doing all digital campaigns there. And then packed up with my partner and we moved over to Toronto, or back to Toronto, I should say. Started working at One Method there, which is a really cool agency. Kijiji, Perrier, San Pellegrino, Gerber, lots of really fun projects there. That was kind of a short stint I did as like a fill-in there, but again, learned a lot and learned a whole other, agency and how they work differently within that. All the while throughout even ends of high school and university and through all these jobs, I was doing freelance too. And Goodness was a startup that happened between myself and 3 other co-founders and an investor. And it was a cannabis startup based in Los Angeles. So for about a year and a half, moved down there and dug into that. And since it was a really small team, was wearing a lot of different hats, acting as a creative department, you could say. So it learned a ton there. And then after about 2 years of that, came back to Toronto, worked at Forstmann Bodenfors for a while. That was a shorter stint. I think I was using a headhunter at the time who was finding me these gigs that I would hop to. So I had fun there working on LG. During Goodness back then, I was kind of had my head around some wine stuff. Growing up in a wine valley here in the Okanagan Valley is where I'm from. I'd always had interest in wine and enjoying it and drinking it, but also a lot of the projects I was doing were in wine. And when a winemaker friend approached me to kind of explore an opportunity that came up to start doing our own thing, jumped on it and it kind of took off from there. And it's been steady ever since. It's keeps me very busy, me and my partner, and it's a lot of fun too. And then more recently, I kind of went into my own avenue and started niching on wine and beverage and kind of my own small studio, which I use other friends in my network to help fill in gaps, but taking on a limited number of projects a year, but bigger projects, and getting to work with small to mid-sized entrepreneurs and companies is what I found I really love the most out of working in creative and branding is the attachment of it to someone's business and having direct effect on all that. So again, alongside all these things has been freelance. And I just wanted to kind of go through some recent work. Work for a beach house restaurant here. And actually I met the owner when I was 16, working in the kitchen. So again, a lot of connections coming out of the woodwork, working in creative industry. You never know when someone's going to tap you and say, hey, we should do something together. Or, I need your help. Or so this one, Hochtaler, it's a national Canadian wine brand, but with a German twist on it. So revamped this as a rebrand and brought in an illustrator friend to bring to life these really cool illustrations she did that focus on Brothers Grimm fairy tales, Germanic fairy tales. Another brand, Black Cellar, under the same brand house, Peller Wines, did a really cool rebrand for that. Very detailed and gothic. Echo Bay, one of the first real things, and actually my first real project that got published by Applied Arts, got some recognition for. It was really exciting because got to work with a family who had just started this winery and had to build something from scratch. So that was kind of one of the first projects where I got to manage the whole thing and see it come to life and see their success as a winery. Here's some of the goodness stuff that we did while we were down in LA. Got to work with a lot of cool people when I was down there, 3D rendering people, photographers. But yeah, it was a connection's unstable, but hopefully you can still hear me. And bringing out this really fun collage style artwork. Part of this company goodness was, the premise of it was donating 20% of all profits to these nonprofits that we would work in under each product category. So a lot of the visual stuff came to life, and we're helping to kind of represent what was important to those causes. One of them was Heal the Bay. Another was a downtown Los Angeles homeless shelter. So it was a really wide spanning company and got to touch a lot of different things on that. Plot, my own baby, got to put a lot of love and time into this, and along the way, getting to work with a really great photographers, I should say, brings that to life. But again, like, had a ton of fun doing the labels and the brand for this, getting to kind of tie some of the typography and the design and stuff with what we were doing with natural wine and wild fermentation, they call it. So you'll see that reflected in a lot of these pretty crazy looking letterings there, organic. And Wine Club is super fun, like working on creating like a subscription-based club. Did these hand-printed folders. Again, very hands-on, just like a lot of wine. We wanted to mimic a lot with our materials and make it exciting every time somebody gets a pack. So actually the making of the folders themselves was like pretty involved, using these massive stamps. Doing everything by hand was crazy, and I get yelled at all the time for making it so difficult instead of hitting print. So yeah, just again, everything touched by hand, and even just going through the process of filming, like making the folders, was a viral piece of content that like people were super keen to see, I guess, based on the Instagram algorithm. So I think it got shared or viewed 130,000 times for free. So that was great for us. Along the same route, got in touch with some people who were starting a brewery on the Naramata in Neoconon. If anybody doesn't know about the Naramata Bench, it's all grapes, and these people tore out fruit to put in barley, which is insane, but they're doing it. So it's called Abandoned Rail. Getting to work on some super fun poppy labels and content for them now, just coming to life in about a month. So another project, and kind of to show some diversity with what I've been doing lately, is working on growing other winery subscriptions. That was a super fun, like multifaceted project, doing the research first, going through and getting to order other people's wine clubs and documenting it and getting to see all that before, making some strategic decisions on how to improve somebody else's wine club. Another brand, building content for them. They had a label and a package design and a logo, but they didn't have content and a narrative. So getting to go and create a narrative for a brand that's already been built is this project. And just some fun stuff to do sometimes is album artwork, where there's no feedback. It's just pure kind of enjoyment of getting to do something I love to do. So working with a friend who has a record label in Mexico and getting to do his series of labels, which he puts out about one a month. And that's it for me.
That is super cool stuff. Thanks for showing that. A couple of things that sort of sprung to mind as you're going through this, and one is, and actually this is a question that I maybe like the other panelists to take up as well afterwards, and it was kind of sprung by the record designs, which are clearly a passion project. And I want to put it to you, like, what else do you do to feed your creativity? What are your like sort of personal projects or just stuff that you do that is not, a part of your normal paid gig? Because I think everybody who's a creative professional needs to have some kind of outlet where they get to do their own damn thing and not have to answer to anybody. And I'm always curious to see what people do to help feed their own creativity. So Adam, what gives with you on that?
Yeah, some of it used to be kind of, and working with my hand. Dude, back in industrial design school, I took a minor in jewelry, silver working.
Oh, cool.
Really love doing, intricate wax carvings and jewelry making. And then kind of, it's so satisfying seeing that piece polished and just working with your hands to do it all. I used to do a lot of that. And then, more recently, I think plot's really taken over my weekend, and our weekend, I should say, because my partner helps a lot. So every weekend we have to drive about an hour and pack boxes and be the people on the ground. So it's a side hustle that became a lot more. So it's keeping us busy.
I find it really interesting that the tactile aspect of the jewelry thing that you spoke of, and using the wax models, and to me that totally comes out just like in the way that you're like the wine club work that was so clearly about an object and about tactility and about that even like using like the embossing stamp, as well as the fact that there's a very analog, tactile human hands are clearly involved in the work. And I can't think that didn't emerge a lot from that kind of work that you do.
Yeah, there's something about getting to shut and doing something that is almost mindless and doesn't involve a screen, and then you can kind of just focus on and think about other things.
Yeah. Let me just throw that question out to everybody else. Kathleen, what are your feed, the things that feed your creativity that you do for you?
Things that feed my creativity. One thing would just be, getting away from my computer. I spend a lot of time biking and bike touring this summer. So that was just nice, just to shut off, not even have reception, be on your bike, very, the bike to camp, set up your camp. So that was just kind of a nice way just to kind of shut down and not maybe look at kind of very tedious details or just things like that. And then I also shoot a lot of film. I shoot 120. So it's nice just to kind of just shoot, not look at maybe, how you'd maybe composite this together or shooting different plates or, just kind of really simplifying things and doing what you kind of originally fell in love with as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's an interesting point about the and I think, you know, and Adam made a similar point, the need to get away from screens. That you know, like, and I worry a little bit about this with the generation of students that I meet and I'm teaching, and I'm afraid that they have never known the, you know, the kind of creativity that doesn't involve beginning and ending on a screen. So you know, again, there's sort of a plea to find ways to get away from that for exactly those reasons.
Yeah, it also gives you the opportunity to kind of think about other things, think about maybe another concept you've been wanting to explore, just other personal projects, right? Just to be able to shut down some of that noise that, you know, the emails or the meetings, and kind of,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Cool.
that balance.
Yeah. Mark and Regan, what do you guys do to clear your heads,
You go.
recharge your
You go
batteries?
first. I'll go first.
Yeah. Well, I honestly, for the first 15 years, I didn't have any hobbies because there just wasn't room. You know, like I was just so into design, like typography was the hobby, hand lettering, like everything kind of related to it. So I kind of pushed everything else aside. But there were opportunities, like I did some sculptural work for, like while I was a production artist, I made some sculptures for an ad. So it's always good to like have those other skills. But really, I don't know, I just loved it so much. I didn't want to do anything else. But in the past, not because I don't love it as much anymore, just I found more time now, and especially during COVID, that there's been a bit more room for hobbies. So I went back to a little bit of ceramics recently. We did a leather poster maybe like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, about 6 years ago.
And then for the Stampede, because it's very cowboy. And so then we both picked up leatherworking because we insist on making everything ourselves. So whenever there's any type of idea that has any outside like skills, we just learn it and then we just make it. So we've done like wood burning, leather making.
Mhm.
We've done
We did some pottery stuff.
some pie stuff. We just do everything we can. And then I also got into yoga a bit, which was very nice and a huge contrast. But it is very good to be able to do something with your hands, something that doesn't have an undo button, because the consequence is something that we miss.
That's huge.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll just answer too. Just it's similar too. Is that it's the idea of getting off the screens? Like really, like Regan said, I think you know, however many 5 or 6 years ago, we did a big poster that was like a leather poster with a fringe on it, and then because we had a few tools and some leftover leather, we ended up just going like, let's start making belts, and I started making wallets, and we started making and separately making different things, and I was making belts and wallets and like key fobs and like more pieces like that. And then just that sort of evolves over time. And then you sell some and you're like, no way, this is kind of a cool thing that kind of inspires something, and it doesn't have an undo button. And I think that's such a great part of it. That's hard. It's difficult. Lately, personally, I've been getting into like 3D printing. So I'm 3D printing like recycled plastics and then mixing them with leather goods for like hanging plant pots, and different pieces that you can try to mash together of like, what if, how does the physical world, that gets me back on the screen. So I'm like, damn it. So I'm trying to drag the other side back into it, make it more of a collaboration that way. And then, yeah, whatever. That's kind of it.
Well, I think that's cool, because it does really kind of point out, if in both your cases, how the job kind of drives you into exploring different types of creative expression and creative techniques, and the fact that, you know, you're kind of, you're open to it and you seek it out, and then when you find it, you continue to have fun with it. Like that strikes me as a huge side benefit of the kind of work that we do, because we get led into these interesting paths, and you just want to grab onto them and like I want to get into 3D printing. Now I want to get into leather work, you know. So it's very, very cool that way.
Cool.
So yeah, sorry, Karen, you were going to say? Did I interrupt you? No, okay. So they're kind of, I want to be conscious of time, but there are two other questions that I kind of like to get to if we can. And the first is, again, it's a little bit of the kinds of things that I know that young people are always kind of interested in when they're thinking about their career paths, as this is sort of very much about. And I'd like to put it out to you, the question of what is in your opinion, what is the worst thing about your job? And also, what is the best thing about your job? And you know, I really want, I want the Jeopardy sound. Dun, 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 dun. Well, I get you to think about it. But who'd like to take that one first? Any volunteers? Worst thing about this.
I can go.
Just pointed at Adam. Okay, sure, that'd be great. Worst thing about your job, best thing about
The best thing is, and I think I've heard it mentioned in the other panels too, is, you know, seeing your work come to life after working so hard on it for so long, and also seeing the brand or the company or the person you're working with be successful as a result of, you know, good work. It's just, there's no better feeling than that. The worst part, I think, is managing the stress and deadlines and that, and the work-life balance type thing, because it's really easy to work late, and now especially working from home
your job?
which anymore, so it's getting harder to separate those two things when your computer's at your kitchen table, and, you know,
Yeah.
it's getting tough.
Yeah, that work-life balance thing is something that you know, obviously the pandemic has really put a spotlight on. I like to believe that the impact of that over the longer term is going to be people actually pushing back and finding ways to run more reasonable balances in their lives. You know, because it is such a demanding profession. The creative professions are demanding in this way, and creative people never really turn off. So it's kind of easy to take advantage of that. Kathleen, how about you? What's the best thing? What's the worst thing about your job?
Worst thing would be maybe managing some of the paperwork, you know, keeping up with invoicing, keeping up contracts, following up with, you know, to kind of maybe more of the paperwork side of it and the business side. You know, it's part of it. You have to integrate that into your day somehow, usually. It's not awful, but it can be, you know, you kind of have to switch modes and take on that hat and take on that role. I think the best thing would be seeing some of your work out and about, right? Seeing either bus ads or billboards, or actually I worked on a recent campaign where it was to raise awareness on the Dakota Bear Sanctuary and logging and all that. And in the end, after the campaign went out, it was actually recently added to the protection list. So that was nice to see that maybe something you worked on actually contributed. And, you know, there was a little QR code on the bus ad that made, you know, connected to the petition for people to sign up and say, hey, like, protect this forest, protect the Dakota Bear Sanctuary, right? So that's pretty neat, right? To maybe see some little idea, something you were part of, and see it maybe work out.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I think it's one of the things that tends to be forgotten in terms of the creative professions, that there's so much opportunity to do good and to be part of contributing to doing things that actually make a significant difference in the world. So that's awesome. Mark and Regan, what do you think in terms of worst things? I can bet on worst things, but
yeah, you can probably bet on the worst things. It's very, you know, it's the same thing that Adam was talking about. That work-life balance is tough, because really, I mean, to be good and great at this, you need to be passionate about it. You need to be strong. You need to do it all the time, to understand it, to like really hard to harness it. And because of that, then you get into that whole tough part of, you got to also let it go, so that you can do something else, so that you can expand or go beyond. But that idea that we pour so much into it because we care so much about it ends up being the bad part as well, because it takes over. So it's trying to balance that work life that I think is the bad part. The good part is, I gotta join with Adam too, is that it's the same thing. It's like when you see work out there that you've done and you say you win awards for it, and you're like, the winning awards is obviously a currency that is built inside of our industry. We're getting judged from the outside, which it doesn't really, you know, it doesn't mean anything to my mom. She's like, I don't care that you won an award, but currency inside our industry is great. But when you see something that works for somebody, or an ad that your parents saw there, your friends saw that they're cool on, they made them laugh, and you're like, that's awesome. That's all I wanted to do. It's the fun part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like that there's no math, like very little math. That is like a very good part for me. And then worst part, I get pretty attached. Like, I know we're not supposed to, and your work is just work and it shouldn't represent you or your feelings. But I think having something that you just tried so hard on and you really honestly do believe it was the best thing for the client, and then it doesn't get made, is always something you kind of have to, you always think. Like, I got a text the other day from somebody about 5 years ago. We worked on a project and he's like, oh, that should have won an award. And I was like, yeah, I wish it did. I wish it got made, but it's tough emotionally sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is the curse of creative professionals too. You have to be absolutely passionate about the work, and then you also have to understand that most of it's going to die, and,
Yeah.
and you know, and you have to be okay with like walking away with stuff, and you know, just moving on to the next thing. But there's a little part of you that always gets a little bit stunned. You know, there's just a kind of no getting away from it.
You get some thick skin. You get thick skin because of it.
Yep.
And I got to side with Kathleen. Paperwork's the worst.
Yeah.
It's-
No
it's the
one
worst.
mentioned timesheets. That's our, yeah. But
Oh yeah, timesheets are pretty bad.
yeah. Sorry, kids. We do have to track that stuff. Otherwise, we don't get paid.
Somebody gets paid.
But yeah. Okay. Again, I want to be conscious of time, but I want to squeeze in one more question if I could, because you guys have been fantastic. If you had to give one piece of advice to a young person who is interested in entering the creative professions, anywhere in it, what would you say to that person right now? We're at a second or two's thought.
I think current year ones is one thing. I would love everybody just to current your ones.
Turn your one.
Kern.
Current, yeah.
Yeah.
Current the one.
Kern the one. Yeah.
That one helped. And if one thing changes, everything changes. So just always be open to change.
Okay, those are two awesome pieces of advice. One, pay attention, just broadly speaking, to your kerning, because it drives me crazy too. But yeah, any one thing can potentially be a huge change. Yeah, terrific. Mark, do you want to jump in there on
Let me think for a second.
that? Okay.
I need one
Adam?
real good one. I think you guys go.
Okay.
I was gonna say, just like start now. So many times, and I know designers and creatives think a lot about things, but just starting it, and even before you start school, you can start learning about design. There's so much out there, more than there ever has been, to teach yourself online things. So start and look at the pictures, read about design and marketing, and understand why it's done, and some of the background behind what we're going to be doing visually is based in business and strategy. So understand why.
Yep. Yeah. That's super. Don't wait for someone to teach you stuff. Just figure out. Just go and start learning on your own. Because as you say, that the resources now that are available are so unbelievable. If you want to just start in and follow your own path, it's totally true.
Yeah.
Kathleen, do you want to?
Yeah, I was going to say something. I was trying to figure out a nice, eloquent way to say it, but essentially, there's moments that are going to be really awful and that are really uncomfortable, and maybe you'll just have a total breakdown and cry about a project, but ultimately you'll kind of come out the other side and learn something about it, right? Learn a bit more about how to maybe pitch a project differently, or maybe it didn't go well, maybe the concept was awful, but you learned a bit more about pitching and just being able to talk about a concept, right? It might have been a crappy idea, but you put yourself out there and maybe you met a few people on the way, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, like every failure, big and small, is actually a great learning opportunity. And
exactly.
It's hard to remember that.
Yeah.
Mark, sorry, did you want to follow up on that, Kathleen? Yeah. Mark, do you want to take the last word?
Yeah, for sure. I have sort of two things that I was just like, I don't know. And they like same with Kathleen. I'm trying to find a nice elegant way to say it, but there isn't one. It's one is like pour your passion into it. Like if you love it, you can tell when somebody's presenting something and you see it in their face and they're just like, this is the greatest thing. And they're so jacked about it. And it's just like, you can tell that somebody is so behind it.
Yeah.
It just, it exudes from them. So it's great. But there's another big thing that I learned.
There was a thing in the Rob Boss documentary, and I think it was something along the lines of talent is passion practiced. Like if you love
Right.
it, you'll be good at it. But just keep going, you'll get there.
Yeah, do it.
Sorry, go
That
on.
was good. Can I say one more thing? One more thing that I learned super late, and it's one of those things of like, of course, learn now, do everything. Like even like Adam said and Kathleen said, like you just have to do it. Like you be good at it. Like you just have to work at it. One of the big things that I learned a little bit late is that you have to sell your product. So like I always, when I first started, I was just like, I would like, ta-da, like I wouldn't say anything. I would just show people work and they'd be like bored and they're like, I don't get it. But they didn't see what I saw in it because I spent so much time and so much effort inside of like creating a logo or a layout or a concept for a spot or whatever it was. And you know, when we're too close to it, it gets a little bit different. So you need to have that opportunity to sell it. And so you need to dress it and walk the client through it like you walk through it. So you have to give them the same experience you have, if you know what I mean. That's on specific projects. But for a lot of stuff, we just need to explain how it goes. And the sale is a big part of the actual work.
Yeah, no, that's a huge thing, and I think it's a great point to close on the fact that it's one thing to be able to do the work, but but the ability to actually talk through it and frankly to sell it, you know, is a really enormous part of the job. And you know, like your great ideas need to get sold no matter how good they are. And the more you can wrap your head around the necessity for that and get comfortable with that idea, I think ultimately the more successful you're going to be in this stuff. So listen, this has been a fantastic discussion, and I've loved talking with you, and I think it's been really helpful for the students who are considering these kinds of careers. So thank you all very, very much for taking the time and having this super fun, very interesting discussion with us today. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Vicky. Thanks.